Hello everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Gaming in the Wild, a video games podcast about games from the artistic, creative side of the tracks from indie to AAA. My name's John, I'm your host, and this week in Reykjavik, I've had more games than I know what to do with. It's been a crazy week for acquiring new games this week, and for trying to squeeze in as much gameplay as possible. You know, sometimes you don't really have a main game and you kind of drift between a few games, or maybe you start a couple of games and you're not really feeling any of them. I get that sometimes. I get these kind of between times. And then other times you have so many games that you want to play that you just really do feel overwhelmed. And that's me this week. I've been playing God of War. Has been one of the main games that I played this week. I'd never played it before, and the recent Sony State of Play with God of War Ragnarok advertised kind of made me think now's the time to play God of War. I've had it downloaded. I have a PS5 with no real kind of next-gen games that I want to play. God of War has had a 60 frames per second 4K update for the PS5, and Ragnarok is coming. I mean, not literally Ragnarok is coming, but the game Ragnarok is coming. At least I hope the real Ragnarok isn't coming. So I've been playing God of War, and it's blown my socks off, to be honest, so far. It's pretty spectacular. I really had no idea that God of War... I mean, I know that it's much loved and very highly rated, but I had kind of bounced on it. I tried the original God of War 3, because I'd read that you should try playing those games before God of War 2018, the remake and reboot. And God of War 3 was just a little basic for me. It had these really fun set pieces, but I wasn't into the kind of the basic beat-em-up gameplay or the kind of combat-based gameplay that much. And it felt a little old. I don't think it's aged as well, especially if you don't have that nostalgia for the original God of War games, which I don't have. I never played them the first time around. So I skipped playing God of War for a long time, but now that I've come to it, I have to say this is a blockbuster like few that I've ever played before. It's really top tier in all regards. The production values, the voice acting, the visuals are incredible. The environments. I'm having less of a attachment to the puzzles, and there's a kind of an overcomplicated upgrade system where you're changing your axe pommel and handle and blade. You really just want to power up your axe, but that's pretty small fry. Overall, this is a real Hollywood blockbuster of a game, and I'm really glad that I played it. I will definitely be doing a future episode about God of War. It might take me a little while to finish, but I am posting some screenshots of my journey as Kratos on Twitter and Instagram, if that's of interest, but I will be for sure doing a full episode about that game at some point. But as well as that, I've also had a review copy of Sable just dropped into my lap. It's under embargo, so unfortunately I can't talk about it very much. But I've been playing a bit of Sable, and I will at least say that it's not disappointing at all. But I will be talking about that one again next week. And then there's been a whole load of promos that came through for me of games that I've been kind of excited about. I got a promo for TOEM, the really cute black and white indie photography game, which I think is from a Finnish developer. That was featured in a recent Nintendo Direct, Indie World Direct, so I'll be covering that one soon. The Forgotten City. It's a game that came out that I've been hearing about on other podcasts that I listen to. A time loop mystery that was initially developed as a Skyrim mod, but went so well that it was developed into a full game, and now it's been pretty highly acclaimed since it came out. It's one that's a little under the radar, I think, in the wider conversation, but the people who know seem to really love it. So I'm very excited to play that one when I get to it. I also got a promo for Black Book, a deck building adventure based on Russian folklore. That I heard Brad Galloway talking about on So Video Games podcast in glowing terms. And as I'm going through a deck builder phase at the moment, I thought, yep, I'm always interested in a new deck building game, especially one that has a really interesting backdrop like Black Book seems to have. I don't know a lot about Russian folklore, but I'm guessing that it's pretty dark and gnarly, and I'm definitely interested. And I also got a promo for Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I hadn't thought I would play this one for a while because if you listen to the show regularly, you'll know that I played Odyssey last year. Although I really enjoyed at least the first 15 hours and the last 10, there was a good 50 or 60 hours in the middle of the game where I really felt like it had lost its way. And I really had to push and power my way through that one and felt very Assassin's Creeded out. But I saw recently that Valhalla has a history mode, a little bit like the Assassin's Creed Ancient Greece history mode, except it's based on Viking history. So it's a combat-free version of the game where you can move through the world, you can look at all the visuals, and you can get cultural information about study of Viking culture and things like that, and of history. And that kind of prompted me to seek out a promo of that one as well. And I think I will play the full Valhalla, maybe after God of War. I think there's only really room in your life for so many, tens of hours long Viking epics in your gaming collection. But I think I will get to the full Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Again, it's another very shiny PS5 game that will be fun to take out for a spin on that shiny next-gen console, which has felt a little starved of games, I have to say, since I bought it. But the main game that I'm going to talk about this episode is actually an indie game that I've been looking forward to for a while. Although I have to say, I had kind of a mixed feeling about what I was expecting from it. I felt like it had a lot of potential. It's visually very interesting. It's from a good publisher, great music, and a fun kind of art style. But at the same time, I had a little bit of apprehension about it too. Like I hadn't seen much gameplay and didn't really know much about the game. But it finally came out last week. It's called The Artful Escape. It's the first game by an Australian game developer. And it's a real psychedelic voyage. It came out on Game Pass, and I played through it in one sitting. So that will be the main featured game that I'll talk about today. But before I do, let me just mention quickly that this show is listener-supported. So if you like what you hear today as a first-time listener, or if you're a long-term listener who would like to join the gang and show your appreciation and lend some support for the show, you can go to patreon.com/gaminginthewild and become a patron of the show for $1 a month or more, for which you'll get occasional extra episodes, sale recommendations, an invite to the Discord community to talk to other listeners and friends and other people that run podcasts of their own. That's patreon.com/gaminginthewild if you'd like to join that community and show your appreciation for the show. So thank you very much to all my existing patrons, and thank you to you if that's something that you're interested in. So there's lots of fun stuff on the horizon for the podcast. I've got all of those great games. I've got Sable, TOEM, The Forgotten City, Black Book, Valhalla, and of course God of War, which I'm really enjoying. And I'll be playing those games across the coming weeks and months, and I'm sure that they'll all be making appearances in the podcast. But with so many games lined up, and with such big games too, it was actually really nice to have a short game to cover that it's just a few hours long. It's on Game Pass. Anyone can try it if they're on Game Pass. And it was a really fun time. So without further ado, let's move on and talk about the featured game of the episode, The Artful Escape. So The Artful Escape is the first game by an Australian game developer called Beethoven and Dinosaur. It came out last week, that is mid-September 2021, if you're listening in the future. It's published by Annapurna Interactive, which is how I first heard about the game. I am a big Annapurna fan, even though they've been on a little bit of a losing streak lately with Last Stop and 12 Minutes and some games that I haven't really clicked with. But when I saw The Artful Escape, whenever I see a new Annapurna title, I'm always curious to try it. So The Artful Escape was on my radar for that reason. The initial release is on Xbox Game Pass and Windows, although I'd be very surprised if it doesn't make its way to other platforms in due course. The game has a really interesting backstory. The director of the game is a guy called Johnny Galvatron, who is named after his old band, the Galvatrons, who used to tour around Australia and had like a decent career there for quite a while. And the game is his next step in his post-music industry creative life. And Johnny Galvatron, I've listened to a couple of interviews with him, one of which I'll put a link to in the show notes. He's a very entertaining character. And the game has such an interesting story. It's based on his imaginings from schoolbook doodles all the way through to his modern-day creations, via his music taste, via 60s and 70s psychedelia and that kind of psychedelic aesthetic, Bowie and Ziggy Stardust and the Bowie universe of creating characters for yourself, and a certain kind of flamboyance. It has a very colourful, crisp Wes Anderson feel to it as well. Sometimes it can feel like you're looking at like a really nice design piece as much as a game. I feel like I saw some Volta-era Björk stuff in there too, very colourful, kind of alien, playful fashion going on, especially in some of these sci-fi fashions that the game has. But it also has a very interesting story of how the game came to be generally. It was kind of a wheeler-dealing story where Johnny had started this game. He had a little bit of concept art, some sort of proof of concept stuff, but nothing even approaching a demo. Tried to launch a Kickstarter, posted some screenshots on Reddit. The Kickstarter failed, but it was seen on Reddit by one of the guys from I Am 8-Bit, that physical manufacturer of console games, who contacted Annapurna Interactive on behalf of this game and put it on their radar, and they became interested in it. They talked to Johnny Galvatron. They asked him, are you going to be at PAX and do you have a demo? And the answer to both of those questions was no. But Johnny, being the character that he is, he saw this opportunity in front of him. He managed to get one of the last tables at PAX, apparently by hustling for it, magicked up a prototype, made some music. There was a 3-month window between Annapurna saying, do you have a demo and will you be at PAX? And he didn't really have much in his hands, but he got that table, he made a demo, he turned up at PAX with some music equipment to strew across the table, borrowed a TV set, and Annapurna came to see the game right at the start of PAX and signed it up the next day. They lent a lot of support and clout to the game, and it ended up with a kind of a Hollywood voice acting cast, including Jason Schwartzman, Lena Headey, and Carl Weathers. So it's a really nice story around this game. It's a really a passion project, and I think that you can feel that. You can tell that it has a very strong aesthetic guideline, like it has a very strong vision that has been brought to fruition in this game. And so how does the dev describe this game? I found this developer description really interesting because it doesn't really talk about the game. It's described as if it's a film. It's just a plot description. And that's the same across Steam and Twitter and even the game's website. So it's more like something you'd read on the back of a DVD case than it is a usual game description. Game descriptions normally include the genre and the central mechanics of the game to speak to gamers. But Beethoven and Dinosaur have described the game as this. On the eve of his first performance, Francis Vendetti battles with the legacy of a dead folk legend and the cosmic wanderings of his own imagination. Francis, a teenage guitar prodigy, sets out on a psychedelic, multi-dimensional journey to inspire his stage persona. So there's literally nothing. You wouldn't even know that was a game if you read that. It could be a book, but it's most likely to be a movie, right? So my description of it is, The Artful Escape is a side-scrolling psychedelic prog rock odyssey in which rudimentary gameplay is offset by eye-popping visuals, a wholesome story of self-discovery, and buckets of humour and charisma. So there we go. I mean, maybe the reason that the description doesn't focus on gameplay is that it is a game that is a little light on gameplay. It's very much an audio-visual production, but that's not a negative to me. That's just what was decided. It's the vision for this game. So Metacritic currently has this at 8 out of 10 across platforms, so it seems that critics have been receptive to this one. The user scores are about the same. How Long to Beat has the game at 3 to 4 hours to complete. So this is a short game with an audiovisual focus that's been very well received by critics and users alike. So what is The Artful Escape? You play as Francis Vendetti. He is a struggling musician, he's young, he's a teenager, he hasn't really found his stride in life. He lives in a small mountain town called Calypso, Colorado, and he lives in the shadow of his late uncle, who was a renowned folk singer, very clearly modelled on Bob Dylan, called Johnson Vendetti. So Francis had a very famous uncle who has passed away, and he's living in his shadow as a musician, as a young musician. And we first meet Francis as he's preparing to play an anniversary tribute concert to Johnson. He's sitting on a bench at the top of a mountain in the wooded mountains around Calypso, just trying to get his shit together. But he's struggling to connect with the material, he's struggling to connect with his own creative impulses, with his identity, and with the level of expectation that has been placed on him. He's a confused young guy. It's very much like a kind of a teen movie setup, you know. And he's kind of afraid to say any of this out loud. It's all part of his internal struggle, his internal life. He isn't really into folk. He's got different visions in his mind. He hears different sounds in his mind. And he doesn't really want to be this character. He doesn't really want to be this folk singer persona that he feels has been pinned onto him at the expense of him developing his own character. He's actually into glam rock, he's into prog rock, he loves to shred and play this kind of ridiculous kind of Steve Vai, very clean, bright soloing. That's his vibe. And the only thing that he can think of to try and shake off this spectre of the past is to try and invent a new person altogether, to stop being Francis Vendetti and to transform into a character that can fulfill his musical vision. And so the night before the concert, after we've gone through a nice introduction where you're just running around the wooded town of Calypso, talking to people, getting a bit of background, it's all very crisp and clean and Wes Anderson style, it's very beautiful to look at, a little bit of very light platforming, but really you're just walking around talking to people, getting a lot of context. But the night before the concert, Francis is visited by an alien who invites him to come to an intergalactic rock tour and open for a star called Lightman, who is voiced by Carl Weathers. And so it is, very much in a kind of a Bill and Ted kind of vibe, that the sci-fi, the wider world, the future, and this kind of sci-fi wonderland kind of presents itself to Francis Vendetti, who jumps at the opportunity, goes out into space, and before you know it, is realizing his dreams in the cosmic extraordinary. I had intended to just play 20 seconds of music as usual and then come back to the podcast chat and the review of the game, but this game is so focused on music, and music is so central to what this game is, and it is such a kind of a bold, bright, big, brash, kind of a stadium rock sound that really defines the whole personality and experience of the game, that I thought I would just let that piece play. That's basically the sound of the game. You're listening to that kind of music for the most of the time, for pretty much all of the game, you're listening to that kind of thing. It has a huge soundtrack that is playing behind the game. And there's a button that you can press to make Francis solo. So there is a backdrop of music, of drums and bass, and this kind of orchestral sounds and synths. And then there's a button that you can hold down, and Francis will solo on the screen as he's running across the screen, in harmony with the backdrop music. So you're kind of running through this cosmic extraordinary, as it's called, just soloing by holding down a button. And as you solo, the world responds to it. Like lights come on, creatures come out to listen, and the world, plants move, and the whole world seems to respond to Francis's guitar playing. It's really, really fun. It's really, really delightful, actually. But as for the gameplay of the Artful Escape, what this all amounts to really is that it's a left-to-right side scroller with very light platforming elements, occasional very, very light and short rhythm game sections where someone will, play music with circle, triangle, and square, and then you have to press circle, triangle, and square in response. It's this kind of Simon Says repetition of a rhythm game. It's not very great, to be honest. I'm always happy when those parts are over. But the fun thing about it is that as you're running from left to right, you have occasional chats with the characters in the game, with Lightman, with the different aliens and the different characters that you're going to meet out in the cosmic extraordinary on the spacecraft where Lightman takes you, and then out on tour throughout the universe, doing things like going to meet an alien talent agent and to play gigs in a strange kind of Star Wars Tatooine-like bars in the far reaches of the universe. What this really amounts to is you're just running through this world of deserts and psychedelic forests and crystalline planets and abandoned cities and strange, wonderful, colourful environments that are just eye-poppingly bright and completely hypnotic and arresting to look at. You're soloing, and then sometimes Francis will slide down a slope like the front of a spaceship that seems to go on forever, or, falling trees or a glacier ice flow in bright diamond colours and prismatic colours. So you're kind of skating almost, and then occasionally you just have to hit jump to cross over a little chasm and to keep it going. Just skating through the game, listening to that huge soundtrack, looking at these beautiful colours, soloing your ass off. And I spent half the game just with a grin fixed on my face because it's such a pleasurable game to play, even with those simple mechanics, that I played it in one sitting. It took me 3 hours and a half or so, and I played the whole thing in one sitting, and that's very rare for me. I'll usually get a little taste of it, go and do something else, come back, play an hour. But I just went through this whole game in one sitting. It was just such a pleasure, a real pleasure to play this one, even with the light gameplay that it has. So let's run through a few positives and negatives from this game. Let's start with the negatives for a change and finish on the positives. So there were a couple of little bugbears that I had with it. The gameplay is very, very basic. I think if you are the kind of player who is up for an experiential game where you're just enjoying rather than being challenged, then you'll love this one. But there are a lot of gamers who really thrive on challenge and on interesting mechanics, and that's what they love in games. And that just isn't present in this game. This game does not have interesting or even fully developed gameplay mechanics. It's really like a 4-hour psychedelic audio-visual experience with light gameplay in a game format. And so it's not a game for people that want hectic combat and to work up their skills. It's a game just to be enjoyed. So yeah, as for a certain kind of player, they're just not going to get off on this one, but other players are going to absolutely love it. I personally think that the platforming is so basic as to be almost inconsequential. It's fun, you're just soloing and jumping. It's like invigorating for what it is, It matches with the theme and the vibe of the gameplay. So to me, even if the platforming is basic, it's fine that way. It doesn't have to be anything more. There is a double jump, and then you can do a kind of a guitar pose in the air that gives you a triple jump, and that's basically it. You have to jump over obstacles, jump over gaps. I think I died 3 or 4 times in the whole game. There is no fail state, it's just an instant restart, and it's never difficult. It's always easy. And so it's very forgiving. And I like a game that is forgiving, and I like a game that just allows the player to enjoy it without gating progress. And this game does not gate progress whatsoever. Another downside is, again, it's a bit of a taste issue more than like a hard critique at the game. And that is that there is a slightly kind of adolescent vibe to this whole game. It's very Wayne's World, it's very Bill and Ted, it's very, 16, 17-year-old guy with pinned up posters of David Bowie on the wall, and an obsession with Fender guitars. It's got an adolescent feel to the whole thing, and that can work in its favour. I mean, it's one of the things that we like about movies like, E.T. or Back to the Future or Bill and Ted, all of those kind of, or Wayne's World, I guess. It's these movies that are about that in-between stage of life. And they do have that kind of, that childish vibe to them. But that also comes with a little bit of innocence to it. And this game does have a little bit of that. It has a little bit of that John Hughes kind of joy at being young, innocence to the atmosphere of it as well. But that does come along with a lot of guitar noodling, a lot of kind of crazy soloing forever, and like sunglasses being cool, and kind of lots of times when your protagonist just kind of says "whoa" in that Keanu Reeves kind of way. And if you happen to be allergic to that kind of young dude, adolescent rock fantasy stuff, then this game is maybe going to fall flat for you. There's not a lot of depth here. It's just a kind of a silly sci-fi epic with a slight coming-of-age story to it as well. And it literally says on my notes here, that's it. Everything else is awesome. So that's the kind of mood that I was in when I finished this game. The rhythm game isn't so great, and it has that kind of teen vibe that you have to be on board with. But other than that, I mean, that stuff doesn't even matter. This is just an awesome game. So in terms of what's good about it, I've put this game is fun. It's just made to be fun. It's made to be delightful. It's made to be enjoyable. And it is a roller coaster from start to finish that is only really concerned with delighting the player, with colour, with sound, and with joy. It's a very, very joyful game. And that's something that I think is missing in a lot of games. If you look at the kind of the zeitgeist of the kind of games that are being made, there is a lot of very dark stuff out there. There is a lot of post-apocalypse. There is a lot of Last of Us, death, and violent games, zombie apocalypses, all of that kind of stuff. And so it's really nice. This game is more in the side of things where games like Watam is, or where Katamari is. It's just silly and joyful and made for your amusement. And so I really appreciate that about this game. I really appreciate where it sits in the gaming zeitgeist. I would say it's a little bit like Psychonauts 2 as well. That's another game that is made to delight you. It's another game that has this kind of psychedelic source material. So it's nice to see these two together. I mean, Psychonauts 2 even has a sort of a psychedelic music level in it. So it's interesting to play these two back to back, considering that I haven't really played any other games that lean on the 60s and 70s psychedelia, and suddenly there's two here at once. So also on the list of praise for the game, the visuals. You can't get away from them. It's just spectacular, the whole thing. From the first mountaintop scene to the moment when you realise that you can light up the town that you're in by soloing and playing chords on your guitar, to going into space, going across planets where there are sunsets across this kind of rippling sand that's like Journey, the glittering of the sand, across strange oceans with just vibrant, eye-popping, prismic colour palettes and creatures of all shapes just coming out of the woodwork at every turn. It's just a real pleasure to behold. It's just like 3 or 4 hours of just pure sketchbook imagination, unrestrained imagination, I would say, with that psychedelic feel to it. And the music very much goes hand in hand with that. The soundtrack is just a huge home run. The whole thing is just a massive prog rock odyssey. That's not necessarily my music taste, that kind of grandstanding guitar stuff. But in the context of this game, I was up for it. I did enjoy the music. It's not something that I would ever listen to outside of this game. It's quite bombastic. It's quite kind of masculine, I guess. It's got that kind of Steve Vai thing going on. It's a little bit heroic in a way that I find to be a bit of a turn-off generally, in terms of the kind of the culture that I grew up with and where that masculine hero artist thing kind of sits. It's kind of outdated at this point, so you have to be willing to swallow a bit of that. I did also really like the story. It is kind of retro classic sci-fi yarn where, you know, like the Skywalker thing, where a young guy in a small town turns out to be a big player on the grand stage of the universe. So it's a familiar sci-fi yarn that we've all heard and seen before, but it feels very comfortable as such. And as I was saying, when it comes to the kind of the enjoyment and the intention of this game, I think for it to be like a comfort viewing, kind of halcyon feeling, wholesome and enjoyable, and just incredibly colourful, well voice acted. The actors clearly have a whale of a time doing the voice acting in this game. It all just comes together very nicely. The visuals, the music, the story, the voice acting, the whole overarching aesthetic, and that light gameplay that doesn't challenge you too much. It all comes together. It really works. So I had a great time with this one. I didn't really have a bad word to say about it. I would really recommend playing it and trying it, especially if you have Game Pass. I will replay this one, I think. It might end up being one of those games that I replay every year or so, like Journey or something. It's low commitment and high enjoyment. That's the Artful Escape. Man, now that I'm listening to it, I really do appreciate this kind of massive grandiosity of this music. It's really fun. It's so big. It's like the rock version of classical music. Do you know what I mean? It's just very big. It's very bombastic. Wonderful stuff. I really enjoyed that game. I'd be very curious to hear what you guys think of it. So if you play The Artful Escape, if you have thoughts about it, if you want to share your screenshots from it, please do come and find me on social media. I'm on Twitter and Instagram as Gaming in the Wilds. I'm also on Twitch and YouTube. You can find the podcast on all social media, basically. So come and share your screenshots from this game with me. I will also say that there is a point in the game where you get to choose your own name, and you are the something something. So you can be, you know, the mesmerizing cobra, or the industrious phoenix, or something like that. And I ended up choosing the delusional swan, and you get to outfit your character as well. And there is one haircut that is shaped like a swan with wings, and so it became this kind of incredible gender-bending, swan-haired, delusional swan. So, and there's a photo moment where you, after you've put your name in, you get a banner. You get to design your costume, and then you can take a screenshot. So if you play this game and you come up with a costume, a look, and a name that you're happy with, do come and share your screenshot at me and let me know what you were, because I was the delusional swan. There is also the Patreon as well, so if you've enjoyed this show, please do feel free to come and join in. It's at patreon.com/gaminginthewild. Thanks very much for listening to the episode. I'll be back next week with a new one. I'm going to aim for it to be about Sable, because the podcast will come out really close to Sable's release day, but that would mean rushing the game a little, and I have been looking forward to this one for a long time. But I will for sure talk about Sable, even if it's not a full review next week. So do pop back next week. If you're on Apple Podcasts, I'd also really appreciate a star rating. If you're listening on an iPhone right now, I would really appreciate it if you went to the podcast homepage and tapped the 5 stars. It helps other people find the show. So thanks for listening. Take care of yourselves and each other. I'll be back next week. Bye-bye for now.